I'm just setting up the last bit. Who keeps the koi? And then what is happening here? One second. All this trouble and edit, add camera. And it looks like we are live. If I can't get the Nabil, have you been, man? What is happening here? All right, well, TikTok doesn't seem to be cooperating with me, so I'm not going to worry about it. I've I think I've exhausted enough time trying to figure out why their TikTok studio doesn't seem to be working. But thank you for being with me on Instagram and thank you for being with me on YouTube Live. You know, I've said I'm going to be going live at least once a day, and so the fact that you took the time out to participate in this says a lot to me. I appreciate you doing that. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about who keeps the koi. And so one of the things that I like to do is I like to browse a lot of the message boards, the Reddit communities, the real estate communities, both as a real estate agent and as a consumer. And I get to see a lot of the cool stories that people share. And so while I have some of my own interesting stories as a consumer, as a buyer, as a seller, and as a real estate agent, as a real estate broker, oftentimes I find these really interesting stories that people share on these forums and on these platforms. So what I thought I would do today is I would actually share one of those stories that I read about a buyer, and they happen to be real estate agents themselves, and it relates to koi fish and koi ponds and the responsibilities of who is going to take care of the fish after the sale if the seller can't take them right away. So we'll be talking about that in a little bit. I just want to give the algorithm a little bit of time to kick in so that people can get the notifications that we've gone live. If you can hear me clearly, please do me a huge favor and just give me a quick thumbs up just to let me know that you can hear the audio and that the audio is coming through smooth. I would appreciate that a lot. It means a lot to me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I doing this now and having to learn this. I've learned how to read some of the reports that come in from Instagram and from YouTube. And here is something interesting that I have discovered. What I have discovered is that over 60% of the people that watch the live videos or watch the reels or watch the TikToks or the YouTube shorts or whatever it is that that we're putting out there, over 60% of you that are watching this aren't actually subscribers or you're not followers of our page. So if you could do me a huge favor, if you could give me a heart on this video, a like on this video, a thumbs up on this video, that would be fantastic. Also be sure that if you aren't following me personally, that you give me a follow or a subscribe if you're on YouTube. That would mean the world to me. On YouTube, click the bell icon so that way you can get an alert anytime that I upload new content. I'm doing this, I'm creating new stuff, and I'm curating stuff for you. So click that bell icon so that you can get the alerts, and it'll also alert you anytime that we go live. I wrote this book. It's called It's Not the Leads, It's You. So for those of you who own a business, for those of you who are in sales, for those of you who are entrepreneurs, this is a book that I wrote about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. It's called It's Not the Leads, It's You, How Top Salespeople Go from Prospecting to Prosperity. This was actually a book this was the first time that I wrote a book and we put it on Amazon. And I did it using AI, artificial intelligence. Now, before you start to moan and groan and start talking about how, if you see me glance up, it's only because I'm glancing at the comments. I can do that. Okay, so if you're on the chat right now and you see Furniture Hotspot, please use her and consider her company. She is a home staging company. She is very good. Her social media handle is at FurnitureHotspot.com. I will definitely give you a shout out. Nabil, thank you for participating. Nabil actually used to live here in Altadena. He and his beautiful family, well, it wasn't Altadena, it was more like Pasadena. He and his beautiful family moved out of California not too long ago, and I had the chance to work with him. Thanks for checking in, Nabil. So the book is called It's Not the Leads, It's You. I wrote it using artificial intelligence. but not the way you think. So, for those of you who are thinking about writing a book, or you'd like to write a book, or it's something you've always dreamed about, I'll just give you a real quick tip. The artificial intelligence doesn't really have any real soul. So, if you just tell it, write me a book on such and such topic, yes, it'll give you very, very dry information that it's collecting from the internet, and it's good information. But the thing is, you can tell right away that it's not really you. It's not in your own personal voice, and it's not going to come across as being authentic. Whereas if you, and I'm just going to give you the tip, if you go onto like Google Docs and then you just use the voice typing feature, right? And you put on a headset or you put on a microphone and you just talk into the Google document, right? So you just explain whatever it is that you want to talk about, whatever it is that you want to get off your chest, whatever it is that you want the book to be about. You can do that and then just start letting it all out, right? And so you're talking into the Google document and you're saying, whatever your level of expertise is, whatever your topic is, you just start really just letting it out, right? Letting it flow out. And then what you do is you take that content, you put it into AI, and you have it basically use AI as your editor, and you have AI clean up that whole topic, but it's still you, it's still in your voice, it still sounds like you, and now AI is just cleaning up all of that stuff. So essentially that was how this book was written. It was me going onto a Google document using voice typing and just, in every chapter just regurgitating every bit of information that I knew on that specific topic, and then having AI clean it up for me as my editor. So if you can pick this up, you can go to Leads Book, Leads, leadsbook.talktopaul.com, leadsbook.talktopaul.com. It'll take you straight to the Amazon page. You can pick up the book. If you take a picture of yourself with the book and then tag me on social media, all my social media handles are at TalkToPaul, DOTCOM. So it's at talktopaul.com, but .com is spelled out. Tag me with a picture of the book, and I will send you a code for the free Audible version as well. Now, if you like Audible and you prefer Audible, it is also available on Audible. You just go to that website, leadsbook.talktopaul.com. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this scenario, right? Who takes care or who keeps the koi? So here's the scenario. We've got a seller who is selling a property to a buyer. Okay, now the buyers are purchasing the property. And the sellers want to leave the koi in the koi pond, koi fish in the koi pond, and then they want to come back in the future at an undetermined time, right? House is on the East Coast, so the weather's a little bit different over there. They want to wait till the climate gets a little bit warmer before they remove the fish. So it's an undetermined time, but they'd like to keep the fish there after they've already sold the house to the current buyers, okay? This is what's going on. Now, in the purchase agreement, there's verbiage that the buyers are not responsible for the koi after the closing. So the language is already in the purchase agreement. When the buyers have made the offer, they initially address this at the very beginning. Now, some backstory on that. The buyers happen to be real estate agents, so they do have a little bit more knowledge than the average buyer, but a good agent would probably consult their buyer to do the exact same thing. So the buyers are buying the home. We're 3 days from closing now. The sellers want to keep the fish in the koi pond, but in the purchase agreement, the buyers have already stipulated that they're not going to be responsible for the fish, and that the sellers are going to be, they're going to be responsible for it, and whatever they do, whatever they decide. Now, here's the deal. They're about ready to close, and the sellers decide that they're going to draft up an addendum. And in that addendum, they're saying that if they find any of the fish to be ill or dead, okay, the buyers are going to be financially responsible for that, and there's a minimum cost of this of $1,000 with no cap. So there's no cap. This can go on and on and on. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars for the koi fish, and they're basically putting that responsibility onto the buyer's lap. Even though in the purchase agreement, when the offer was written up and accepted, by the way, and signed off by all parties, and probably in the escrow documents reinitialed again as a reminder of what everybody agreed to at the very beginning, even though we've got a seller who is now saying, I need the fish to stay there. Oh, and by the way, if the fish get ill or sick or die, you're going to pay us a minimum of $1,000, but there's no cap as to what the damages might be. All right? That's the scenario that these buyers are in right now. Now, in addition to that, they've also put more language in that addendum that says the pond must not have the electricity can't be turned off, okay? And no animals can mess with the fish, and no additives can be put in the water. All right? So some of these things are completely outside of your control. Now, them stipulating that the electricity can't be turned off, right? Let's say that there's a short somewhere, something goes wrong, a fuse, breaks, and your electricity goes off. Well, it obviously affects the pond. Now that we're talking about no animals, well, what if you've got if you live in a rural area? What if you live in an area where you've got raccoons or possum or other animals that could come in and kill the koi? What if you've got a dog that just wants to kill the koi, or a cat that decides they want to kill the koi? And lastly, the additives or the chemicals, right? No messing with it. So this is what the seller, 3 days before closing, decides that they are going to request from the buyer in the form of an addendum. So they had their agent. Seller has their listing agent. Buyer is representing themselves because they are agents, right? And so the listing agent drafts up an addendum on behalf of the sellers 3 days before closing, requesting all of these items. All right. And just to recap, and you can't hear me now. No sound. Let me see what happened to the sound. That's interesting. Can you hear me now? I'm seeing that there's sound on the mic. It's coming through. I'm still seeing you live. No sound. Interesting. I'm going to log on to my own Instagram and just take a look and see if there's any sound now. I love it when you go live and you have things like this happen. So just bear with me while I figure this out. It shows that I have audio, but I'm getting comments from people that there's no sound. So just hold on. I'm sure Facebook is... Okay. It says live. Okay. I'm seeing sound here. Okay, well. I'm seeing sound here. Yep. So it shows that I do have sound. Anyway, thank you for watching out for me. I appreciate that. For whatever reason, other people weren't hearing sound, but it looks like everything's working out okay. So just to recap, okay, we've got a buyer. Buyer's purchasing the property. We've got a seller. They're about to close. They're 3 days from closing. There's a koi pond in the property. Seller, on 3 days before closing, decides that they're going to try to impose an addendum. They're presenting an addendum to the buyer, and on that addendum it specifically states that the buyer is not to touch the fish, the buyer is not to turn off electricity, the buyer is not to have any animals near it, and the buyer is not to mess with any of the chemicals of the fish, or they will be responsible for damages no less than $1,000 or more with no cap. There's no cap as to what the cost of that damage could be or the cost of the expense should be. So here's my question to you. What would you do? Right? What would you do in this scenario? Now, if you were the buyer and you're buying the house and you're 3 days from closing and you've got a seller that is now telling you, don't touch the koi fish, leave them alone, and if anything happens to them, I'm going to charge you a minimum of $1,000 with no cap. Now, mind you, prior to doing this, they had already agreed in the purchase agreement. In the purchase agreement, they've both already agreed that the buyer would not be responsible for the koi, and that the seller would be responsible for transporting them or anything that would happen to them. So this has already been agreed upon before the actual transaction is getting ready to close. They've already signed it, but 3 days before closing, the seller decides they're going to try to impose this in the form of an addendum. What would you do? This has really happened. This is a real story, okay? So let me preface what my take on it or my spin on it. I'm looking at some of the comments on Instagram. just to see what we've got, and on YouTube. I'm not logged into Facebook, so unfortunately I can't see those. I apologize. But let me preface everything or all the advice that I think I might give with this fact. It's easier to mediate and meet in the middle. Okay. Now I know that there's some people that are going to say, well, you know, they already signed something in the beginning that stipulated that the seller is going to be responsible for it, so it really doesn't matter. Buyer should just close the transaction, and whatever happens to the fish happens to the fish, right? I will say that that is one strategy, that is one way to handle it, that is one way to take care of this problem. However, there is the possibility that the seller could always come back and try to, litigate this, try to sue. It's always a possibility. So, in my opinion, it's much easier to mediate and meet in the middle than it is to just try to impose your will. It's always much easier. As unrealistic as what the sellers are requesting or what their expectations might be, as unrealistic, as crazy, as out of left field, as psycho as they might sound, right? They're not my clients. It's better to mediate. It's better to try to meet in the middle as opposed to, create these opposing forces, all right? So before I go into what the possible solutions are, I want to preface it with that. Second thing I want to say is I'm not giving any type of legal advice, okay? No legal advice. So this can't come back to me. You're saying, hey, I heard Paul on an Instagram Live, and he was suggesting that I do this with a different scenario. It may not be koi fish. Maybe who knows what it is. It could be lizards. It could be, who knows, butterflies, whatever it might be. The point is that I'm not giving any legal advice. I'm just telling you the scenario and some of the possible solutions, prefacing all that with, it's better if you just try to meet in the middle and mediate as opposed to litigating this thing out, all right? So let's go, what are the possibilities? Number one, you can close. You can always just close the deal, right? As the buyer, everything's already been signed. You're 3 days before closing. Let the chips fall where they may. Again, that may not be the nicest way or the easiest way to do it, but you can do that. Number two, you can extend. That's the other option. Now, here's the challenge with extending. It's winter time wherever this property is, and I believe that the property is located on the East Coast, and so they want to leave the fish in that pond until it actually warms up, which could be months from now, 2 or 3 months from now. And so if you extend the transaction, what you're going to have to worry about now is you're going to have to worry about the cost of extending it and the possible interest rate lock, right, that may expire. Okay, so all of these things are additional expenses, and not to mention the fact that if you do extend, then the buyer has to take into consideration, the possibility of that interest rate adjusting if the interest rate does, go up, or it could go down, but it's more likely to go up. So you'd have to pay the rate lock fee, and then you'd have to pay an extension fee. So there's all these additional expenses just to extend. So really, who pays the extension? Would the buyer have to pay the extension, or would the seller have to pay the extension? In my opinion, if you were to extend, I would suggest that the buyer put that on the seller's lap, since it's the seller that wants to keep the koi fish in the koi pond if they're going to extend. All right. Now, I probably wouldn't do that if I was the buyer. The second thing you can do is just require that the seller remove the koi. Third thing, sorry. So the third thing you can do is just have the seller remove the koi. It's your fish, your responsibility. Remove the koi. It's very similar to number one. You can just close and then demand that they remove the koi. It's probably better that the buyer issue a notice to perform and have the sellers remove the koi prior to the close of an escrow, right? Because the koi would be technically considered personal property. So that's another option. Have the seller remove the koi fish by issuing a notice to perform and a demand that the seller remove the koi. Next thing is pet insurance. That was something that I read. These are all different possible solutions that I came up with, and some of the solutions that I saw some really, really intelligent brokers and real estate agents that they were providing advice on these boards, right? So pet insurance. Now, here's the thing with pet insurance, right? You could say, okay, close the deal and then require that the seller pay for the pet insurance to insure those fish. Well, the thing is, when it comes to pet insurance, the insurance is for veterinarian treatments. It doesn't necessarily protect it from any type of death, okay? So a few other people researched it, and then I went in there and I kind of double-checked it too as well. So there isn't pet insurance that's going to insure the koi fish from death, at least not that I am aware of. If you sell pet insurance and you know of anything, feel free to chime in now. From my understanding, is that there isn't any, but it's likely not to cover death. And then the other thing that you could do is the buyer could have create an addendum claiming non-responsibility and a hold harmless and no access. Okay, so if the as a buyer, it's probably better for you to create a new addendum claiming non-responsibility of the fish and a hold harmless, right, from the seller, especially since they're already creating all these addendums that sound a little bit litigious, and then let them know that they're not going to have any access to the property once it is closed and no access to get those fish back or to treat the fish or transport the fish. So basically, remove the fish before we close escrow. I said it earlier, but you can attract a lot more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. So the best solution is one where both parties feel like they are, mediating. They're meeting in the middle, and everybody walks away happy with this. Now, is there a perfect solution? Probably not. There probably isn't going to be a perfect solution. Some of the backstory that I read in this scenario was that the sellers were purchasing, they're taking the proceeds from this home and they're purchasing a new home. And based on their purchase, they're probably not going to have any additional money available to pay for the transport of the fish or to pay for the storage of the fish, which is why they are requesting that the buyers assist them by keeping the fish in the existing koi pond. And take on the burden of the expense of the electricity, the utilities to do it, the water to keep it there, and the chemicals and additives, and the maintenance of the fish, feeding them and taking care of them as well. So it's a tough situation because you've got a seller that is trying to move into their new home. It looks like they might be short of money to be able to handle the transport and storage of that fish. And then you've got a buyer that is basically saying, like most buyers would, they're not my responsibility, they're your responsibility, they are your fish, they're your personal property. It's your job to remove your personal property and your pets from the property when we close. Oh, and by the way, just as a reminder, we already agreed, 30 to 45 days before we got to closing, we already agreed that you would be responsible for the fish anyway. So this is just one of those interesting scenarios, interesting stories that we come across as real estate agents, as real estate brokers. As always, if you are thinking about making a move as a buyer or as a seller, look, you hear conflicting reports. You'll hear that some people say it's a really bad time to buy. You'll hear people say it's a good time to buy, it's a good time to sell, it's a bad time to sell. It really all depends upon your personal it's your personal timeline. It's where you're at in your life right now, and it all varies from person to person to person. So if you are in a position where you are ready to make a big life changing decision and you have to move or you have to buy or it's time to buy or you've outgrown your house and it's something that you need to do, well then by all means, right, it's a good move for you. But it varies from person to person. There is no one size fits all model here. So if you are thinking about making a move, if you are thinking about making a purchase, by all means, please let me know. I am a real estate broker and I would love to help you out. Just to recap real quick, please like and follow. If this video brought any value to you this morning, or joy, or just interesting conversation, please give us a like, give us a follow. Like I said earlier, more than 60% of the people that are watching our videos, the reels, the TikToks, the shorts, the YouTubes, the long form, all of that stuff, more than 60% of you are not followers of our content, right? So please click the subscribe button, click the bell button so that you can get alerts every time we go live. And just as a reminder, if you haven't picked it up, you can pick it up. You go to leadsbook.talktopaul.com, leadsbook.talktopaul.com. It's a book that I wrote. It's called It's Not the Leads, It's You, and it's a great book for anybody that is in sales or anyone that is an entrepreneur, because if you're an entrepreneur, at some point you are in sales. At some point during your entrepreneurial journey, you are going to be selling your service, your product, your business, and so you're going to need to know how to do that, and this book does a really great job of doing that after 30 years of experience as a real estate agent and as a real estate broker. All right. I appreciate everybody participating in this. I'm going to look for some more interesting stories that I can share with everybody. If you have any likes or comments, let me know. We'll talk in a bit. Have a great Wednesday. Take care. Bye.